Are we still good here? Okay. Last week we spoke about 2 misconceptions of the Passover holiday, debunking these misconceptions, fundamental misconceptions. The first one was, what is freedom? What were we freed from? What does it mean, freedom? Number 2, were the 10 plagues to free the Jewish people? The answer was also no. Okay, misconception for us today, misconception number 3. The purpose of splitting the Red Sea was to save the Jewish people. True or false? False, you got it. Nothing to do with saving the Jewish people. Okay, let's look at the sources. Number 1, we have a source in Exodus 14, chapter 14, verse 8. It says in the verse, black and white, that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he took the Egyptians and he ran after the Jewish people to the sea. Oh, that's very nice. Hardening the heart of Pharaoh, eh? Rashi, the great commentator, says right there that Pharaoh was deliberating whether he should run after the Jewish people or not after he agreed to let them go 6 days earlier. So he's deliberating whether to let them go, and God comes in and hardens his heart. Go for it. Oh, that's really fair. So once again, if God wanted to, he could have let Paro deliberate to himself, that Paro would have come to the conclusion, listen, this is a losing cause. Or even if he would have come to a conclusion to run after the Jewish people, God, as we said last week, God controls the hearts of the leaders of the world, the governments of the world. And therefore, this could have all, if it was just to save the Jewish people, this could have been avoided. The drowning and the suffering of the Egyptians. The Egyptians are people. They have families, they have wives, they have kids, they have friends, they have businesses. Okay, let's get real. I keep on saying that because sometimes we look at holidays and we're like dreaming, and we're not down to earth. So that's number 1. Number 2, Maimonides. In an amazing Maimonides, most people are not familiar with this, but Maimonides says in the Foundations of the Torah, chapter 8, Law 1, he says that a prophet does various miracles, or if there's a need. So Moses, for example, he split the sea. For what? It doesn't say, Maimonides does not say to save the Jewish people. Amazing! I would have thought that, well, Moses, he had to come up with some kind of supernatural potion here in order to save the Jewish people, but doesn't say that. It says that Moses had to use some supernatural powers in order to drown the Egyptians. Whoa! Maimonides clearly sees the purpose of the splitting of the sea has nothing to do with the saving of the Jewish people. The only reason why the sea was split, it was in order to punish the Egyptian people, in order to drown them. Amazing. This is also a verse, straight out, in Deuteronomy, chapter 11, verse 4. There is no mention in this verse of the miracle of saving the Jews. It is only talking about the drowning of the Egyptians. That is what it's talking. A verse straight out of the Torah, not one mention of God splitting the sea to save the Jewish people. No, God saving the sea in order to drown the Egyptians. In fact, the book, Arugat HaBosem, page 421, says an amazing thing. It's very unusual that God tells Moses, the Jewish people don't need to pray. Tell them not to pray. I don't understand. We're in a situation where the Egyptians are right on our tail. Isn't this a great time to pray? What else do we have to do? We can't fight the most powerful army in the world, the Egyptian army in the world, the most powerful army in the world. According to some figures, there were 9 million Egyptians that came to the sea. There's an opinion in our sages. 9 million people. Okay, so what should we do, God? Not pray. God says don't pray. And the Arugat HaBosem hits it out of the field, and the ball is still traveling. He says the following: there was no danger to the Jewish people. Therefore, there was no need to pray. This whole trick was to drown the Egyptian people. There was never any danger to the Jewish people. It was just a way to get the Egyptians to run away from Egypt and come and meet the Jewish people on the sea in order to punish, take revenge, and avenge what was done to the Jewish people. Remember all the 10,000 babies that were drowned in the sea. So that is the Arugat HaBosem. More so, the Egyptians see the Jewish people going to the water and the sea splits. Now, any idiot would have understood, listen, I see that God is on their side. He just split the sea for the Jewish people. Anybody with a half a pea of a brain would say, time out, we ain't going into this water. We see that God is fighting for them. Let's get out of here. Let's head back to Egypt. Huh? They see a miracle that happened to the Jewish people. After 10 plagues, miracles that happened. And they come into the water? Whoa, God is pulling a fast one on them. They have lost, so to speak, they have lost their mind. Or another scenario. Why didn't God have it that Egyptians run after the Jewish people for whatever reasons, and once they get close to the Jewish people, God puts up a pillar, a pillar of a cloud, and the Egyptians cannot see the Jewish people because of this pillar of cloud. So the Jewish people cross over the sea, and that's it. And then after we're on the other side, okay, put back the water, and then we'll just keep on going on. The Egyptians have no choice here but to go back to Egypt. Well, how many lives would have been saved? But that is not what God did. If we look, every day we say in our morning prayers, the song Az Yashir, Jewish people, Moses singing praises to God. If we look at that, the overwhelming majority of the subject matter of this praise to God after the miracle of the splitting of the sea is talking about punishment, vengeance, measure for measure against the Egyptian people. Why not just talk about the saving of the Jewish people? The saving of the Jewish people is mentioned, but it is only a small percentage of the material in this special song, one of 10 songs in the Tanakh, in the Torah. It is only a small percentage because that was not the main point. The saving of the Jewish people could have been done in many, many other ways. It wasn't, because, as Maimonides said, the purpose was to punish, measure for measure, the Egyptians. More so, we are told in the following sources what happened. Amazing stories that happened at the splitting of the sea. Listen closely. we are told in the book Shochar Tov of our sages, 22:1, or Yalkut Shimoni, 440, and other sources. The Egyptians were dying. Then God brought them back to life on the shores of the sea. There, the Jews saw their masters and took their dogs. Dogs? How come the Jews had dogs? I doubt they had dogs in Egypt. Well, see, when the Jews left Egypt, they took the dogs from the Egyptian masters. Now this is a miracle that occurred. Imagine, for who knows how many years, I don't know how it works, maybe Tzvi could help us out, but a dog's life, years, is not the same as a human being's life. So I know like sometimes a dog lives 5 years, but they're really 20 years old in our terminology. I don't remember all of this Torah here. But anyways, imagine that these dogs were taken from their masters by the Jewish people when they left Egypt. We are 7 days later. They still recognize, a dog remembers. They remember their master. You would think that they would attack the Jews because their master, they see their master on the shore of the Red Sea. The miracle was that the dogs listened to the Jews, and listen to what it says, amazing. A Jew that was beaten via an Egyptian's hands, the Jew who saw his master came with his dog or dogs and said, "See this hand that beat me day in and day out? Sick 'em!" And the dog would, I don't want to get too graphic here, but I think you get the picture. We might have some kids out there, the gory dogs. Or a Jew with his dogs saw his master on the shore. Once again, God allowed them to survive, or some of them died and then they came back to life. He sees his master who used to kick him in certain places in the body. And the Jew would sick the dog on the master in that place where the Jew was beaten. And it goes on and talks about the different types of attacks that these dogs that now belong to the Jewish people did. The Mechilta in Bishalach writes that the Jews attacked their Egyptian masters with stones, clubs, whips, and kicking. If you remember the song, everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kicks were fast as lightning. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kicks were fast. Yeah, I guess they were kung fu masters. And listen to this amazing gra. If you came to this class, is Jewish retaliation, is Jewish vengeance kosher for Passover? Listen to this amazing gra, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, some 250 years ago, on the book of Mishlei, chapter 11, verse 10. Listen closely to these words. When God has bestowed upon the righteous good, the community is happy. That's a certain level. Right? People are happy, satisfied. However, when the wicked disappear and are punished, they praise God by rejoicing. That's amazing. The Gra is telling us, if God goes and saves the righteous, okay, we're happy about it. Okay, not such a big deal. But if the enemies are destroyed, then we go out in full force and celebrate. The Gra concludes, the real point of singing on the Red Sea was the celebration for the destruction of the wicked Egyptians, and not so much the saving of the Jewish people. This is also similar to the holiday before Passover of Purim. This idea happened also. First, the Jewish people were saved. Mordechai was saved. And the Jewish people were exalted. However, when the Jewish people had killed and were victorious and vengeful against tens of thousands, something like 76,000 people that they destroyed, when they meted out vengeance, then there was the amount of joy took a totally different level. So this is an amazing concept. The saving of the Jewish people is a great thing. It's a first step. We are very happy. However, if the enemies of the Jewish people are punished, therefore the celebration is 1,000,000 times greater. The crescendo can be heard. This is an important debunking of a misconception many religious Jews have. Listen to this. According to the Tosfot, in the tractate of Erchim, page 15, side A, tells us an amazing thing. He's not the only wolf here, the Tosfot. There are, for example, the Meiri, the famous commentator on the Talmud. He tells us on Psalms 137. Or the Radak, the famous Torah commentator. He tells us in chapter 11, verse 16, the Judges. They all say the same thing. What was the idea? That the Jewish people did not need to get to the other side. The Jewish people did not cross from one side of the Red Sea or the Reed Sea to the other side in order to escape. Amazing. They come, the Tosfot, the Meiri, and the Radak and others. They say, no. What happened? The Jewish people went in one way and they came out the same side that they entered. Here we have a picture of drawing in the Talmud of it. You could see, here's the land of, we'll go up a little closer here. Here is the land of Egypt, and here's the Nile. And the Jewish people left Egypt going, and they went into the water. Here's the Red Sea. They went into the water here, and they came out at the same place on top. Amazing. So not what we thought, what we grew up thinking. And when I say grow up, some of us might be 120 years old, and we still believe that the Jews were in danger because they needed to get to the other side to be saved. They didn't go to any other side. They went in and out the same place that they entered. Amazing. So once again, the whole purpose was to punish the Egyptian people. And we saw what kind of punishments were there with those dogs. I mean, there were other punishments, of course, that our sages tell of it, and also the verses talk about. But these were big time. Anyway, some of you might remember, or you've heard, that the angels wanted to sing, not the Los Angeles angels, but the angels wanted to sing also as the Egyptians were beginning to drown, and God calls a timeout and tells them not to sing. However, most of us stop the film right at that place. You know, we're like in the 7th inning, we didn't play the full 9 innings. If we would go to the end of the 9th inning, we would see the following, that Tosfot in Tractate Sota, page 30, side B, quote, the beginning is Rabbi Meir, says, he shows us that when the miracle and the vengeance was taken, finished against the Egyptian people, Also the angels sang. Also the angels sang. So if anybody comes up and said, well, God stopped the angels, that is true. That was only at the beginning stages. When it was all over, like, that's all, folks, they sang. And listen to this one. This is really amazing. The Mechilta in Bishalach, chapter 5, says that not only the Egyptians in the Red Sea drowned, but Egyptians back in Egypt, there was some type of flood there. And they were also destroyed. Some kind of like Katrina. Some kind of Katrina hit the Egyptian in Egypt. So it's so clear that the splitting of the sea was not in order to save the Jews. The splitting of the sea, God doesn't have, if the purpose was to save the Jews, as we spoke, it could have been done very differently. There was no need to kill any Egyptian. The Jewish people could have been saved, and without any Egyptian being hurt. But that's not what happened. Not only that, we see now, according to our sages, there was flooding, as if the waters of the Red Sea had come into Egypt and flooded them also in the land of Egypt. What does that have to do with saving the Jewish people? These are people that did not go out to war. These are people that stayed back. All vengeance, punishment, measure for measure, sanctification of God's name. This is your punishment. This is what you did to the Jewish people for 86 years. Okay, you're going to be punished for it. Okay, last but not least, misconception number 4. Let's debunk it. Innocent bystanders, right? Title of our class is Jewish Retaliation Kosher for Passover. We know that 2 weeks ago, 2 Jews were murdered. I did a class on it. 2 of my neighbors were murdered in a city called Chawara. Elon Moreh, from where I'm giving this class in the Holy Apple, is 20 kilometers. And from Elon Moreh to Chawara is 14 kilometers. So Chawara runs for approximately 5 kilometers, and there 2 Jews were murdered. After that, good Jews retaliated and burned stores, houses, etc., cars, and all over the world there was condemnation, and also from within the Jewish community, and also in the rabbinical community, against the Jews. Now, you have to understand, every time I come here, it's kind of like a Russian roulette. I hate to say it, but it's kind of like a Russian roulette. Who knows who's going to get hit? Just Sunday, 3 days ago, another Jew from one of the hilltops of Itamar, which is a neighboring community of Elon Moreh, an American fellow, was hit in the head. His car was fired at. He had miracles of miracles, tremendous miracles, thank God. But person, it always kills me when I hear that a person was injured lightly. I have a friend in Elon Moreh who lives. I heard with my own ears on the news, they said that he was injured lightly. Folks, till this day, that was 20 years ago, he walks with crutches, and he has all types of sharpenel in his leg still, and there's nothing that they could do about it. Not able to walk without the crutches, and he's many times in pain. I mean, to hell with that statement, lightly injured. So this person of the hilltops of Itamar, they didn't say that he was lightly injured, they said he was seriously injured. So, don't think that the guy is playing tennis or basketball today. These these attacks affect Jews, affect people for entire lifetimes, unfortunately. They are handicapped for entire lifetime. Okay, so how do we look at, I mean, it was a very light-scaled, I would call it a light-scale vengeance against the Arabs. How do we look at that? As I said, there was a big condemnation in all types of camps, also from the right, so-called right-wing camps, even from religious rabbis. So we have now the fourth misconception. Let's debunk it. Innocent bystanders. Listen closely to the 10th plague. The 10th plague was the killing of the firstborn. So, our sages tell us the following, that if there was a firstborn born in Egypt, but he went abroad, he lives abroad, he also died on the night of Passover. He also passed over. But I don't understand. I understand that he was born in Egypt, but he left. He had a visa, he went to work in other places in the world. He didn't subjugate the Jewish people. He wasn't an ambassador over the Jewish people. He didn't enslave anybody. He also, those people, those firstborn, though they were abroad, wherever they were in the world, they were destroyed. Number one, it seems like it's innocent bystanders. Maybe the rabbis will protest against this also. Next, a firstborn from a different country who was visiting Egypt. Or had moved to Egypt. He didn't have any slaves. He didn't have any Jewish slaves. Why in the world was he killed? He's from a different country. He's not responsible for all those years of the Jews being slaves. Next, there were POWs, prisoners of war, that were taken by Egypt in various wars that they fought. Now these POWs, as you can imagine, they hated the guts of the Egyptians. The Egyptians had placed them into these camps. They hated their guts. They didn't put any Jews in captivity. They were in captivity. POWs. What was their crime? It seems like they, too, are innocent bystanders. Egyptian slaves. Yes, the Egyptians enslaved other Egyptians, not just Jews. There were many Egyptians that were slaves, like the Jews. They were also killed. I don't understand. They were slaves of the Egyptians. They weren't enslaving Jews. They had their own problems of being slaves. Why were they blown away on the night of Passover, on the 10th plague? And to answer all of these fundamental questions and understand, go over this again, very, very important. Lesson number 1. This is based on the tractate of Avodah Zarah, 18a, or Sota 11a. Firstborns in Torah ideology are responsible. They receive double the inheritance of others because they're responsibilities. We know, every one of us know out there, various, the firstborn, I know my daughter, my firstborn daughter, she has a lot more responsibilities within the family. People look up to her, people ask for advice. She's the oldest, and she also has more responsibilities towards the family than any other kid. So at the same time, they do have a lot of, so to speak, they do have a lot of privileges, the firstborn, but they have a lot of responsibilities, a lot of obligations. And therefore, we are told that a person who has a say, everybody, let's take it from the beginning. These two sources that I quoted, everybody is responsible to protest. Even if nothing happens from our protest, everybody is responsible. Every person, how much more so every Jew, is responsible. If we see a wrongdoing, we are responsible to protest. If we see a crime, we are responsible to protest. Nothing happens, nothing came out of our protest, we just wasted our time. No, you didn't waste your time. You have an obligation. How much more so a person that people listen to, a leader. A leader that doesn't protest? We know the famous story, Job. Why was he punished? He didn't protest against what was going to be happening to the Jewish people. He didn't protest. He didn't say to enslave them or not to enslave them. He just kept quiet. But he was an advisor to Pharaoh. So therefore, the suffering that he went through, we should not know from his suffering. It says in the sages that it is better 70 years of suffering than the suffering of Job. Why? Because he had more responsibility. He was a political figure in the government of Pharaoh. And therefore, his message, if he would have protested, it could have been accepted. Same idea here with the firstborn. They have a lot of leverage. They have a lot of clout. And they did not protest against what was going on with the Jewish people. The people that lived abroad, the firstborn, if they would have communicated with their families and say, listen, what you're doing to the Jewish people is wrong, please stop, there was a good chance they would have listened. And even if not, they never protested it. So it doesn't matter that they lived abroad. Or it doesn't matter that firstborn from other countries that were in Egypt, they also didn't protest. They saw what was going on with the Jewish people, how we were subjugated. They did not complain. They did not scream. In the words of the Baal Shem Tov, when it hurts, you scream. What does it help if I scream? It doesn't help, but you scream. Because that is what God expects from us. If you see an injustice, scream, protest. So, even firstborns from different countries that were in Egypt and they saw the injustice and did not protest, were punished. Next, Shmot Rabbah, 18:10. Shmot Rabbah, 17, chapter 17, paragraph 5 says, why were these people punished? The ones that we mentioned, these 4 or 5 groups that we mentioned. They did not want the Jews to be freed and redeemed. Even prisoners, we talked about, there were Egyptian slaves. It says in our sages that they were given an offer, listen, if you agree to work, if you agree to let the Jewish people go, what do you have to say about that? And they said the following. These slaves themselves said to this offer, do you think we should let the Jewish people go? They said, listen, I don't care, you can do anything you want to us, but we are totally against the freeing of the Jewish people. I don't care if you keep me enslaved forever, just don't let those Jews go. That is an amazing statement. Keep us enslaved forever, just don't let those Jews go. Next, the Bechilta speaks about these types of people that were innocent bystanders, not so innocent. One, we said they didn't protest. Number two, they did not want the Jews to be freed or to be redeemed. They were even willing to sacrifice themselves in order that the Jewish people should not be freed. Number three, Mechilta, Exodus 13, chapter 13, paragraph 1. They were happy when they saw the Jews suffering. Yes, they were prisoners of war, and they hated the Egyptians. But when they saw what was happening to the Jewish people, they were happy about that. Now, they didn't touch one Jew. They were just happy about it. When you see attacks in the land of Israel, all over Arab cities, Arab communities, villages, they're handing out candies, celebrating that a Jew was hurt or a Jew was killed. Remember, dear friends, let's get real. Every plague, there were 10 of them. The splitting of the sea, destruction of the Egyptian people. We're talking about men, women, children, babies, the sick, the handicapped. Summarizing, it says in the Tractate of Kiddushin, Jerusalem Tractate of Kiddushin, chapter 4, law 11, or Tractate of the Sofrim, chapter 15, law 10. This is also brought down in the Code of Jewish Law. In the times of war, even good Gentiles are eliminated. This is learned out from the experience of Egypt and the freeing of the Jewish people. There were God-fearing Egyptians that brought their animals inside. They were God-fearing. They believed God's word. These were the same people, these good Gentiles that believed in God's word. And they believed, and they took their animals and put them inside so they would not be killed, because Moses said that any animals left outside would be killed. These were the good. These were the righteous Gentiles. These were the same righteous Gentiles that gave over their animals to go and fight and chase and destroy the Jewish people that left Egypt, and to destroy the Jewish people after the Jews had exodus from Egypt. These are the good Gentiles. That's why it says, we learned that from Passover, the good, the righteous Gentile. So, the law is clear. At a time of war, even good Gentiles are eliminated. And the Maharal, the great philosopher, Jewish philosopher, in Or Chadash, on chapter 4, and other places, he says, we must eliminate them and not have mercy on them, because they will not have mercy on us. Today in Israel, folks, is Jewish retaliation, vengeance, kosher for Passover? It's not only kosher for Passover, it's kosher all year round. We hear from political leaders, the far-reaching arm of the Israeli army, the IDF, will reach the terrorist or terrorists. Dear folks, what do they think? We're idiots? The problem is the terrorist or the 2 or 3 terrorists. They're the problems. They're not the problem. They're a small part of the problem. That's not the problem. Problem is the population. The Arab population, we spoke about this. Go look for the video on My Neighbors Were Murdered this week. Go over that. I talk about how do you expect any Arab to love Jews. They all know Arabs that were arrested and tortured. They know whether it was, of course it was, they deserved it. And they had to get information for them to stop attacks, of course, but forget about that. For an Arab, they're not interested in the details. Every Arab in Israel, the 1.6 million Arabs, they know people that were arrested. They know people that were tortured. They know people that were injured, crippled for life. They know people that were killed. They know people that were beaten in demonstrations. And the list goes on. And we know, what are they learning? What are their textbooks? What are they learning in school from the age of 5 years old? Hatred against the Jewish people. Hatred is a nice word. Cruelty against the Jewish people. You think we don't understand? We do understand. Right, there is a terrorist, and there are people that are willing to be terrorists. Those are maybe 20% of the Muslims. But there's dozens of percentage of Arabs that are happy when Jews are injured. They are happy when Jews are killed. You don't see it on CNN. You don't see it on Sky News. You don't see it on Fox News. They don't protest. They're happy about it. In a time of war, we have to stop this nonsense. The terrorists, the 1, 2, 3 terrorists, they are a small point of our problem. Our major problem is the 1.6 million Arabs here who support. If you don't have a supporting cast, you cannot function as a terrorist. You need the supporting cast of the community. Those are the real enemies. So folks, our last 2 classes, I'm going to summarize the 4 misconceptions of Passover. Fundamental misconceptions. Number 1, freedom. We were freed from Egypt. What does that mean? What does freedom mean? Number 2, the purpose of the 10 plagues was to free the Jewish people. Once again, false. Number 3, misconception number 3, splitting of the sea. The purpose of the splitting of the sea was to save the Jewish people. False. It was to punish and to revenge against the Egyptian people. Number 4, misconception, the so-called concept of innocent bystanders. When there's a war situation, there are no innocent bystanders. Have a meaningful Passover, and we'll meet in a couple of weeks, God willing. Till then, take care.